Welcome to the Monocle Banking Podcast, your weekly investment into the forces reshaping finance one algorithm at a time. Today we're in for a treat as we chat with a true trailblazer in the field of artificial intelligence, Dr. Nasila. Now, if you think AI is just about teaching your phone to recognize your face or possibly misrecognize it when you've just rolled out of bed, think again. Dr. Nasila has been watching the rise of AI long before it became a buzzword, using it to reimagine risk management and set new benchmarks at one of South Africa's most forward-thinking banks, FNB. He's here to talk about his new book, African Artificial Intelligence, where he tackles everything from AI's potential to revolutionize industries to why Africa needs to discover its own AI identity or its AI sovereignty. So grab your coffee, sit back, and let's explore how machine learning might disrupt everything we thought we knew about banking. Well, banks are under a regulatory avalanche, and it's making talk of innovation difficult, with one rather stark exception: artificial intelligence, or AI. Despite all of the consent orders and hushed voices of the past year over hot topics, everyone still seems to really be wanting to talk about AI. And it's a little ironic, given this area is likely one of the most uncharted of all for many executives, but it seems too omnipresent to ignore. According to CCG Catalyst New Frontiers survey for 2024, which asked C-level bank executives in the US about their attitudes and priorities, AI is likely to be the most impactful to their industry. It poses the greatest opportunity for their bank, but it also comes with the most risk across a range of innovative areas asked about. That made it pretty much all-consuming across the survey results, and it just signals that this technology and its applications in financial services are very much top of mind for bank executives today. So, Dr. Mark, it's great to have you on the podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today, and maybe you can just kick us off by telling us a little bit more about your journey, because you've had a remarkable story from earning a PhD in mathematical statistics to becoming a leading voice in AI at FNB. What initially sparked your interest in artificial intelligence, and how did that passion shape your career path?
Thank you so much, Michael, for having me, and to those that are joining us. I've had a very interesting career, which I'm very grateful to. I did my undergraduate degree at Walter Sisulu University, then moved to Port Elizabeth, where I did my honors and masters in mathematical statistics, then joined First National Bank in 2010 as a young quantitative analyst who was very eager to use their statistics and computing skills to solve, real-world problems. I embarked on my PhD, and in my journey, my interest for problem solving grew and grew as the impact of big data was picking up. Those days, Facebook was now becoming a big name. Google were growing their journey. But I think my luck came so much when I bumped into my friends from Singularity University, Mick Mann, Shane Mann, Ashley Anthony from Isazi, who felt, to drive this thought leadership, it would be good for me to be part of the training. And I went to Silicon Valley as part of the Global Summit, and I got so much exposure learning from how organizations were thinking about technology, because while the technology is there, the disruptive thinking innovations kind of spiked my interest in the way it is applied. And when I got back to my function, we started actually implementing small language models in 2019. So today our risk assessment processes and due diligence processes are done with small language models, that the teams don't have to write those reports. We've got very mature fraud and risk identification models, and we, extending the same capabilities across the organization. I've been very lucky to have a very good team, as well as the vision of our leaders in the bank have been critical in powering our ideas in line with what they're trying to achieve in their strategy.
That's very interesting. It's almost like a first-round GPT that you've introduced into the bank. And clear that there were pivotal moments that influenced your approach to integrating AI in banking, chief amongst them the Singularity U founders, the Mann brothers. And it is always interesting positioning yourself at the forefront of these conversations, because I think sometimes we feel a little disconnected in South Africa from what's going on in Silicon Valley. How far, having studied there, having visited, how far away do you think we are in terms of our evolution and approach to AI are we when compared with what's going on at the bleeding edge in Silicon Valley?
So they're a bit much more mature, because that has been their primary business from the time they invented the startups or even when they began their strategies. They deliver faster, they implement at scale, and they mature their products faster. Also, much of the organizations are very small organizations, so they get to products and they transform organizations quicker. Having said that, the finance industry or the banking industry in South Africa is very well mature. It's at the same standard as us, for example, in America. But in the real sense, they solve problems faster. Also, if you look at the American region or even Silicon Valley, go to China, there's a bigger trust for technology. So you get buy-in. Remember, the technology we're talking about only has value if it's integrated in people
Yeah.
using it. Yes, so that is a big difference. Today, here, we're already struggling. A lot of organizations don't even have a strategy in the African continent. We're talking about 9 or 10 countries who have put some policy in place or even a strategy. So you have to have things you want to outline, you've outlined to achieve like any other strategy so that you can embark on an AI journey.
And it's a central theme in your book, the importance of Africa discovering its unique AI identity. And in fact, at the recent SU summit, you mentioned that we could potentially lose our AI sovereignty. Could you just elaborate on what that identity looks like and why it's critical for Africa to carve its own path in AI development?
So the value of AI comes from what you do with it. And a strategy articulates opportunities as well as challenges or problems you're going to solve, as well as building blocks that are required to be able to realize the value from AI. The problems we want to solve for AI in Africa are very unique, ranging from things like unemployment. We've got the highest informal unemployment rate. We've got big challenges in agriculture where we spend so much on importing food, despite the fact that we've got the highest arable land. We've got challenges with our education system. Those are areas of focus for us, and they're very different to other areas. Then we also got issues around data and managing them, and how do we set up data centers so that they can power these initiatives successfully. Those are very unique. Then we've got trust and cultural issues, which AI must also adhere to, or else people will not use it. In China, they've got their own cultural issues. Like, for example, you have to pronounce someone's surname followed by the name. In Africa, for example, you can't just use algorithms and call someone and say, we've picked up, you're pregnant, let's sell your product.
Yeah.
In instances, they have to keep that secret. So those things have to be considered, and they form part of this identity that would help us realize AI success. And we can't just take solutions and passively apply them, especially the ones that were developed without oversight of what would help us realize AI maturity.
And I can imagine a component of that also being, building up a corpus of vernacular languages on which to train some of these models, because you need isiXhosa, isiZulu, a range of vernacular languages in order to ensure that we don't rely on models that are going to give us bias at the end of the day. Natural language processing requires that as an input. Where are we in terms of ensuring that we start focusing on this, that we as corporates, as governments, ensure that money is funneled into this kind of research and development to ensure that we're not left behind?
So at the current state, African languages, in fact, just African data is not well represented, especially in the pre-trained models. When you look at the current versions of ChatGPT or Gemini, they're much more developed on Western data. But we have the likes of Lelapa AI who are doing some work on training large language models on African languages. We have startups like Ohlale, Isazi, who are coming up with bespoke solutions that look at the African setting, use cases, chatbots, vernacular-enabled chatbots. But that's not enough. I think if you think of influencing the continent, it needs more than just a few startups. We need a bit of a power budget, support, infrastructure. And the other challenge is that some of this language has to be actually collected. Some of these, if you look at the medical industry, we're told only 2% of their data is digitized. So that data has to be digitized, because previously doctors wrote things in files and they're just stored in stores and shelves. All that has to be digitized. The context of sovereignty is around ensuring that countries have control in the value chain of AI development. Sovereign AI is about making sure we don't just look at value from the final AI products. We look at value from AI in the process of developing AI. So at the Singularity Summit, I talked about AI factories because an AI factory creates opportunities for modernization around the areas where data centers are located. You also need people to power these factories. And through that process, you create employment because of the need of those people.
It sounds very much like government has to play a key role here, because often when you talk about this early stage development, the economic imperatives, the commercial imperatives are not what is going to drive someone into the field to help broaden this corpus of knowledge. What would you like to see from government in creating lead markets in developing AI? Let's just stick to the South African context before we talk broadly about Africa.
I think there's two aspects must take the lead. First one is government must be clear on creating policies that bring all the sectors together to define the role of AI, especially from a policy perspective. And the reason for that is that the current phase of AI has been about just driving efficiencies or driving effectiveness or even just reimagining the same products. And that's why we can see probably the corporate sector might be even a bit far ahead than the other sectors. But the phase we're entering when we're talking about sovereign AI requires the sectors to work together. So the government must bring the sectors together and set up a vision of what we want AI to do for South Africa. There's already a lot happening, different work groups. Like, for example, us as an organization, we're also driving our own AI strategy. And those lessons can come together to make sure that we mature the journey. The second part is powering literacy in making sure people understand AI. And this is not technical literacy, or we call it building citizens of AI, people who understand how AI works, who understand the limitations of AI, building on the human intelligence skills, because without the human intelligence, then we're not going to have AI working. If we combine those two, where we've got a vision and people understand the technology, then it's easy to bring together because you need people to power the vision.
Absolutely. And, in your book, that's one thing that certainly struck me and was quite reassuring in the chapters where you talk about the 12 industries that will be disrupted by AI. Naturally, as a journalist myself, I found the one on journalism and media and entertainment very interesting. But the fact is that we still need human minds capable of making complex emotional connections and judgment calls and contextually sensitive deep dives. And that isn't going anywhere anytime soon. Just to come back to the book, it's one of those that has very practical elements, case studies. You've also, from chapter 15, you look at some of the more difficult stuff for the lay reader out there. But I think very important to understand concepts like large language models and how they're powering these tools like OpenAI's ChatGPT. And that's why I think it's a very important book, because you don't shy away from the difficult technical stuff. And I think we all need to understand what underpins this technology. You look under the hood and what makes it work. Because to come back to your earlier point about trust, isn't that what is going to foster the trust in boardrooms and decision makers into the positive that this technology can unlock?
Exactly. I think we've made a few mistakes, especially as us driving technology, where we've not humanized the approach to adopting it across various industries. The truth is that every single industry today is not immune to AI impact. Also, as part of this journey, when we talk about efficiencies or effectiveness, we're talking about using AI to allow people to do things which people are good at doing. And there's lots of opportunities that already existed that people were not doing, that technology is not good at. Second part is that there is no single organization that is going to keep up with the current reality while doing things the olden ways. A reality that is made up of geopolitical complexities, rising or fluctuating interest rates, the digital expectation, emerging risks like climate change. Just technology itself is powering industries, as well as emerging regulations. There is no organization that is going to survive with people doing work that machine is doing, or machine doing things that human beings should be doing, which brings a sense of comfort that this human-machine partnership we're talking about will be at the core of what becoming an AI organization or an AI country is.
Yeah. But, the flip side of that is if you're not a company, an organization, a boardroom, an individual who's thinking about how you can use AI to augment what you're already doing and to make you more productive, then you're going to fall behind against those who are using these tools. And I think that's where the real sort of threat lies. The immediate threats,
Yes.
and there are obviously much bigger threats that you do tackle in the book, some more existential around bias, ethical considerations around, how we deploy it and that kind of thing. But to bring it back to banking at FNB, and you mentioned you've implemented some advanced AI systems, some small language models that have really revolutionized risk management inside the bank. What specific challenges did you face when introducing these AI-driven solutions? And maybe you can just talk to me a little bit more about what exactly it does and also how you overcame some of the early teething problems to implement this in such a large organization.
I was very lucky because I worked under a risk leadership that already had appetite of driving efficiencies. You know very well, as an organization, our systems, processes are subjected to some of the most complex acts of financial crimes, as well as we just got so much complex regulatory requirements that we have to adhere to. When we have to identify these incidents or even transactions, we build algorithms that help identify them, either flag a customer or flag transactions. And through this process, you have to assess to actually confirm the incident. That process is very tedious. And it was all about allowing people to focus on the final end of the process, the decision making, but use technology to gather data. And for example, the small language models would transcribe or write the reports and provide to them for their final review. The first challenge was change management. And it's important. The change management has to be planned at the onset. So the way people work when the technology is there is very different to the way they were working without it. It's important to prepare people for the future and not wait for it to be there, then tell them, no, use this technology. Naturally, people are scared of technology. This AI comes with social, economical change. People are worried, people are concerned. And it's important that you give them a sense of comfort so that they power it to the potential. The other challenge is now you have to plan to scale the use of AI, identify similar opportunities where the same capabilities can play a role. And you end up having to become a marketing person of a technology, but you have to humanize it and make it a value conversation. That is the biggest challenge. And today we've seen in the past 2 years, there has been so much promise of, generative AI, large language models. Unless you make it a value conversation, it's very difficult to convince stakeholders that to invest in it as well as support it, given the fact that they need to be patient for some time until the solution matures.
Just on that point, because in the book you speak about the immense value of AI. It has to be a value conversation in order to unlock budgets, to get, C-suite buy-in. So where do you see the immediate value for AI to reshape traditional banking processes? Is it in customer onboarding? Is it credit risk analysis? Is it in AML and detecting fraud and other crime? Where do you see the early wins, the low-hanging fruit, in order to convince those internally and externally that this technology is the game changer that many are touting it to be?
So I will put them in two categories. One, AI is already and will drive the main business of banking. Banks exist because of risk management. They take risk, right? We sell risk, but through the process of selling risk, we have to market that risk to customers. So just the traditional risk management approaches, whether it's credit, money laundering, there's an opportunity to drive not just effectiveness, but to reimagine what the construct of, for example, credit risk is. So when we talk about financial inclusion, it's a new way of making sure we drive inclusion through risk management approaches that could not cater for every customer. So that is where AI is playing a major role.
Right. On that point, I just want to stop you there because we know that AI-based credit scoring could bring more speed, certainly, but we know that there's model bias that can be a problem. So is there a risk here for the banks that they use AI in credit scoring and unintentionally perpetuate that bias?
So bias in reality is a risk. It's possible to have unexpected outcomes. And that is why, for example, as an organization, we've got controls and processes to ensure bias is critically tested. I think organizations that are trying to mature their AI journeys are not just thinking about opportunities, they're also proactively thinking about what could go wrong, and not just bias in general AI risks. At the beginning of this year, large language models have introduced misinformation, disinformation as a new form of risks under the AI landscape. And all these risks are part of what construct on the way we protect the value from AI. So obviously, bias is very complex. It could creep into a model at any value chain if you misinterpret or misdefine a problem statement, or whether it's data bias. It could be just a process that introduces bias in the value chain. All that value chain has to have controls in place. So any organization, whether it's credit, whether it's an attrition model, whether it's a fraud model, those checks are critically important and in line of what AI is being used for, to make sure that AI bias does not creep in the process.
When we look at the technology behind all of this, it looks like, I mean, we know that AI requires serious computing power, and I think many banks are opting for hybrid cloud solutions. So could you walk us through your thoughts on that and why hybrid cloud is the architecture of choice? How is it helping banks with resilience and real-time processing and ensuring that it can handle this kind of data load?
I mean, for a long time, I think organizations like banks like ourselves had in-house data centers, but also it becomes too expensive to run these complex data sets, especially for use cases that require high frequency data. And that's why, cloud as a service becoming so common, because, the likes of Amazon, Microsoft, Google are doing all the groundwork in making sure they set up these services. It becomes easy to just consume the services, and not just for data storage, but including some of the services that require, analyzing or building AI algorithms. That's the way it becomes easy to focus on the business of banking enabled by those services.
Often, when we talk about cloud, there's a cost conversation that sometimes we miss out on. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be cheaper, because you've got to also manage how many queries your teams are generating. And so sometimes I think when people first go into this hybrid model, they're actually surprised to see some of those costs go up. But it's all about the value that you can derive from it,
Exactly.
and being able to be agile and nimble enough. Maybe you could just share an example of the FNB journey and the kind of value that you've derived from going this route.
I think that's a great point. A lot of organizations are working for AI instead of AI working for them. And fundamentally, it's around embarking on an AI journey without having a strategy. And it's very easy to have a point of focus in those building blocks that form successful use of AI by articulating needs, what you want to do, which are the areas of focus. A lot of it is focused around the data. And if you go through my book in the data strategy section, I talk about a data-centric approach. So in the olden days, for example, organizations try to create a data lake, but it's very expensive to manage whole organization's data. A data-centric approach allows you to focus on the data that you need for the use cases or opportunities that are powering your strategy. And that way, you spend less on managing the data that is required, but also you spend less on just focusing on the services you need, whether it's from the cloud or from the softwares or the analytics platforms. And it allows you to get a higher return of investment because you're only spending on what is needed for. Certainly, a lot of CFOs today should have much concern, because with AI and data powering businesses, you don't want to make so many mistakes at the beginning
Yeah.
and end up, actually spending more fixing the problem than actually using the technology to power the organization strategy.
Just a penultimate question, because all of this is, again, it's underpinned by people. You've been a strong advocate for building AI skills in Africa. So what initiatives do you believe are most critical for equipping the next generation of African AI specialists?
I do think we're well equipped with data scientists, AI researchers. We've got very good universities. We need to have two strategies: the strategies that protect our talent, but also strategies that upskill society to be able to work with AI. The first one is around how do we make sure that we have good AI strategies, data strategies that will incentivize people from leaving the country, to go to Europe, to America, because people work hard, they spend a lot of money to acquire skills. And when they come to an environment where they cannot apply these skills, they end up leaving. I think studies have shown that especially the young generation is very, very keen to solve problems and to help the African continent modernize and solve its challenges. The same strategy is critical for the second point, because if you think about it, we need to make sure that we equip society with skills on how to work with AI. But that must be done keeping in mind that as a country or as a continent, we don't have much resources like the Singapore or America or China who made so much mistakes in their journey. We don't have big economies. And a strategy will allow us to envision what type of sectors will prioritize AI in the future and work backwards to what skills are required to help people work with AI within those sectors. The unfortunate mistake we're likely to make is spend lots of resources helping people learn theoretical aspects of AI, then spend a lot of resources helping people learn how to apply these skills. It's likely to be a mistake. We should follow the examples of Singapore, where today they've said people over 60 are going to be equipped with skills on working with AI in their own capacity or in their workplace.
Right. It's a far more practical approach.
Exactly.
Just lastly, if you had to summarize the key message of your book for aspiring data scientists and AI enthusiasts, or just executives who want to understand, the right questions to ask, and you do conclude with a chapter on what kinds of questions boardrooms should be asking about this, what is the key message that you want to land from the publication of this book, which really is comprehensive?
The message is that AI is here and is disrupting every single industry, every single sector. But at the same time, for the African continent, AI provides a source of hope that we can leverage this technology to realize our potential. At the same time, it's the most difficult technology to get right. The book is about equipping everyone, and everyday person, with skills to understand AI, understand how it works, understand their own responsibility to making sure this technology works, but also to equip them with insights on how to hold other stakeholders accountable, ask the right questions, where are those opportunities, or how are these opportunities empowering the bigger picture or the bigger strategy. How are we making sure we're not falling behind, especially given as a continent we always play catch up when we've got an emerging technology. How are we making sure that we're not introducing risks to our country or to our organization, and how are we driving an inclusive approach of powering societies so that they're part and parcel of this journey.
Extremely important and very worthy questions to be asking at this point of our AI development, still very nascent. And this is exactly when we need to be engaging with these kinds of things so we don't head down the wrong path, as you say, particularly when it comes to skills training and investing in the wrong kind of approach to data projects inside an organization as well. That wraps up our conversation today. Thank you very much, Dr. Mark Nasila, someone who, as an AI data scientist and data strategist and expert, has a voice that is definitely worth listening. And your book has certainly raised a number of questions for me that I'm going to be grappling with over the next while. So thanks for your time.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me, Michael.
Well, if there's one takeaway from today, it's certainly that AI is here to stay. It's powerful, and it's not just about self-driving cars or chatbots with questionable social skills. It's really about transforming entire industries and redefining what's possible, and maybe, just maybe, giving Africa a new edge on the global stage. But there's a lot to do for Africa to embrace its AI sovereignty and to ensure that we can compete. A huge thanks to Dr. Nasila for joining us today. He's not just a member of the Singularity group, a faculty member there, as well as a member of the National Institute for Theoretical Physics and Computational Science. He's also a professor at the University of Johannesburg with a PhD in mathematical statistics, as we discussed earlier, and head of data science at FNB as well. So until next time, keep those algorithms friendly, and we'll see you next week on the Monocle Banking Podcast. Remember to like and subscribe. Until then, this is me, Michael Avery, signing off.